Thanks for tuning in. Let's talk about setting goals. Well, before we can talk about setting goals or the processes involved in all that, we should probably review what is the goal. And there's so many different ways to group or understand or define goals. So please don't think that what we're going to talk about here over the next few minutes is the only way to do it. These are just some goals or ways of looking at and understanding goals that we're going to use in this class, and just a way to kind of get you started so that you've got a framework to pull from, so you can make these decisions on how you want to set your goals and the types of goals you want to set moving forward, not only for your own personal career, but also eventually when you become a leader within your organization. The first kind is an outcome goal. And this really, in the world or the parlance of sport, really focuses on the outcome of the event, let's say. So it's going to be involved in, yes, did you win or lose? Did you win your division? Did you win conference? Those types of things. And outcome goals are very common. You see these in when those people, when coaches or managers and people like that really talk about the goal setting process, oftentimes they gravitate initially towards outcome goals. These are going to allow for and involve some sort of interpersonal comparison, comparing people and comparing teams, and usually involve some sort of metrics, which is why I think people gravitate towards them. But what we want to do is kind of caution you on setting or engaging only with outcome goals. Okay? And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. Second type would be performance goals. And they specify some sort of end product of the performance. So again, within the world of athletics, this is going to be achieved by the athlete independent of maybe others that perform on the team. So maybe you have a team that is not terribly productive, doesn't win a lot, for example, so has poor outcome goals in terms of goal performance. But maybe you have a star athlete who is very, very competent, or even an elite level performer individually. So you in terms of being a coach that works on that team and works with that athlete, for example, you would want to make sure that performance goals are part of that person's repertoire, because you want to make sure that that person can grow, that athlete can grow and continue to develop, irrespective of what's going on in the larger team environment. And that's going to be something as well that's important in the sport organizational setting. Maybe you have an organization that is not functioning well, but you have an individual employee that is. And so you want to set performance goals so that you can really help to continue with the individual development of that person. Process goals will be focusing on specific behaviors. They're going to be exhibited throughout some sort of performance. So I have two listed there. One is follow through with your shot. Again, if you're kind of more coming at this from the coaching point of view and wanting to work with athletes, process goal is going to be very similar to a lot of the things that we've talked about in this particular section of working on the technical or the mechanistic aspect of something. A shot or a serve or a putt or something like that. Or in the sport organizational sport management setting, process goal might be to have a natural sounding and friendly sales call. Whether the outcome of that is actually a sale or a season ticket sale or something like that, let's set that aside. But maybe the process goal is to sound very natural and at home and not nervous on the phone or something like that. Used in isolation, as I was sort of alluding to on the last slide, outcome goals are the least effective, right? And hopefully what you're able to see from this is that it's really about using all three of these types of goals together, which means setting goals is not just a haphazard thing. Outcome goals, while easy to understand, should probably be set in conjunction with performance and process goals. That way you have a better way of tracking and understanding individual and collective growth, productivity, performance, effectiveness, that type of thing. If you're going to be working with an athlete, the athlete needs to understand the difference between all three of these types of goals and really how they need to work and feed into each other, right? And so this is where the coach or the leader within an organizational setting kind of becomes a teacher, right? So you need to learn this stuff, and you need to think about how to apply it to your own possible career or life, simply because at some point you're going to be helping others walk through this process. So why is goal setting really effective? We know that, okay, if we use all three of those goals kind of in combination, in conjunction with one another, it's going to be effective. Why is it effective? Well, it really just helps to control or direct the attention of the individual into achieving that goal. But also, it does two things. One is it tends to mobilize, activate, or increase effort and persistence in achieving a goal. It gives you a way to focus the energy on completing something. And it also helps the athlete or the employee learn new ways of not only achieving goals, but also the ways of setting new ones down the line, right? So goal setting is not just a set the goal, check the box when you achieve it, right? There then needs to be that process again where, okay, I've achieved these goals. Now I need to set new goals. And it's a process that's sort of built off of the previous, right? You're not going to have the exact same goals that are going to be administered or monitored in the exact same ways. And this thing needs to be, the large outcome goal down the line might be years and years off. So you need to make sure you have all these smaller goal setting or attainment strategies working together to build the individual, right? Their performance or their development, build the team or the organizational environment, but then also, as you all are going to be involved in leadership roles, how can you build leadership capacity within that organization or for that individual? And that's really why goal setting is effective. Is a lot of people like to say, well, I don't need things to be too organized and things like that. And that's fine. That might be how they think about it or how they talk about it. But, decades and decades of research has shown that psychologically humans like structure, and they need it in general to be effective, to be productive. And so if you're not devising a strategy of how to attain, and then going through the process of trying to attain these goals, then it's hard to sort of envision a lot of examples where individuals are going to be individually or collectively successful by whatever metric you use to define success. So that's really what it's about. It's about kind of harnessing and focusing that energy towards something. So here I just call it the top 10. There's actually a decent overlap between some of these, but these are just ideas from practitioners, from coaches, from leaders in the world of business, in sport business, and advertising. These are just some of the ideas that I've kind of culled from all these different sources. And these are just ways to set effective goals. One, make your goals SMART. Many of you have probably already heard of this, but specific, measurable, attainable, and either relevant or realistic. It just kind of depends on the source that you consult. And then time bound. And if your goals have those parameters, then you've thought through them. And being that they're intentional, then there's usually intentionality behind the goal attainment strategy, which means people are more likely to go through the process of achieving it. Number two is obviously just part of the time bound of SMART goals, is that, again, clearly articulate the time constraints. If you want to engage in a physical activity program and lose weight, by what time? If you say, well, I just generally want to do it, then what we know is that people are not usually successful in completing and following up on those goals. I think another one's really interesting is use moderately difficult goals. You don't want the goals to be so difficult as to discourage you, because you do like the sort of increase in dopamine and that rush to make you feel good about achieving something. But if your goals are super easy, then you're not pushing yourself to grow, which means that they're not really goals. You're setting parameters that you can already achieve, and that would probably speak to some larger processes that are at work in your life. Write goals down and monitor them. I love number 4 because people assume, oh, I can just set my goals in my mind, and no, be explicit, right? If you write it down or type it, I mean, whatever, but if you put it out there, then there is a little bit of physical accountability because it's been said, right? And once you write it down, then you can start devising the strategy, again, whether you write it down or type it out, doesn't matter, in terms of how to monitor your progress on achieving these goals. And this is, when you look back in sports, a lot of famous historical examples. Emmitt Smith of the Dallas Cowboys used to write his goals down, and they were taped up in his locker, so all the reporters and his teammates could see it, right? And so it was written down, and then there was sort of a little bit of accountability because everyone knew what they were. And so, yes, he had his own strategy to monitor those, but other people could monitor his achievement processes as well. As we've discussed before, use a mix of process, performance, and outcome goals because it really shows, even if you lose a contest or a game, you might have done some really good things in that, right? Even if you didn't get that, let's say you're selling personal seat licenses or things like that. And even though you didn't get the sale, you might have really developed a nice strategy, and you've really developed a nice process, and you need to make sure that you sort of get credit for that. It's not always just the outcome, it's the process, it's the performance, and then down the line you hope that all these things come out into these larger outcomes. Use short and long range goals. This is something I really enjoy doing, and so I every day I make a to-do list of projects that I need to complete. And then I have, in this sort of telling on myself here, so I have a daily to-do list, and then I might have a weekly to-do list, and then I have a long-term that it's like a projects to-do list. And I make one of these usually in April, and that needs to be completed by August, right? So it just kind of keeps me on track moving forward. Set team and individual performance goals. Set practice and competition goals. I think that's really interesting. And you might think that number 8 is purely for those people that are involved in coaching and working with athletes. That's not the case. As you start thinking about large, high-profile sport organizations are usually involved in lots of professional development and additional training, and that training is part of practice, right? So practice and competition goals really can apply to the sport or the corporate world as well. Make sure the goals are going to be internalized by the individual. If you're helping them set these goals, but if they just set these goals because they feel that's what they're supposed to do, then at that point they're more managing their impression, and it's what we call kind of acquiescing to sort of this social pressure that, oh, I should have these goals that are X, Y, and Z. And you don't necessarily want that. What you want goals that are going to be part, that individual says, you know what, and by internalizing, you sort of bring it into yourself and you say, yes, I truly believe that these are the goals that I want to set so that I can start achieving them. And I'm going to achieve them because I want to grow individually and collectively and those types of things. And then consider personality and individual differences in goal setting, right? If you're helping someone set goals, not everyone has a very aggressive personality or communication style. So as a result, the goals need to be tailored towards them. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. These goals, you might have goals for the collective group, the team, the organization, the sales department, whatever it is. Yes, but individual goals need to be tailored to those people. And people have different personalities, different things, different strengths, different weaknesses. And the more you learn about that individual, then the better you can tailor the goal setting processes and strategies to them. Some common mistakes, kind of alluded to some of these earlier. Either poorly written goal statements or you just don't write them down at all, right? Or a failure to, you've written down the goal, but you haven't devised how you're going to attain that goal. You haven't devised how am I going to get from A to D. Well, A, B, and C are going to be really important to arriving at goal D, right? Or maybe they devised the strategy, but they just didn't follow it, right? So I'm going to get better by working in the off season 5 days a week, and I'm going to work out doing whatever it is. Well, you've got it all written out. You know what your goals are. You've got your strategy. And then you said, yeah, you know what? I'm just going to work out twice a week. That means you're not following the strategy, which means that the likelihood of achieving that goal is greatly diminished. Or let's say you say, oh, yeah, I set it for 5 days a week, but I'm going to work out 7 days a week. Well, maybe you're not giving your body enough time to recover, right? So maybe that 4 or 5 days was chosen for a particular reason. Okay, so being able to follow it's important. Failure to monitor progress is really, it's pretty common. We get very busy in whatever it is we're doing. We sort of get set in our routine, and maybe you're not making sure that you're tracking your blood sugar, you're not tracking your blood pressure, or you're not, whatever it is that's part of your goal attainment strategy and process. If you don't monitor it and kind of engage with it on a regular basis, then the chances are it's going to be much easier to get off of that track or be wayward in your process attainment. Discouragement's a real common one. You see this a lot in fitness goals. People that are trying to lose weight for health reasons, and they're like, I'm working out 5 days a week. I'm doing all kinds of stuff. I'm watching what I eat. I'm burning 2,000 calories a day. I'm only taking in 1,500 calories a day, but I'm not losing any weight, right? So sometimes that discouragement is really a big deal because it can really inhibit people's ability to move forward. And sometimes that's the combination of a couple different things. Maybe the goals were too difficult, like they were set too high at a level. So you need to lose 5 pounds before you can lose 50 pounds, kind of a thing, right? Or maybe there are just too many outcome goals that the person was not able to achieve, so they're not able to celebrate the small victories, and they get discouraged because they haven't hit that, I need to drop 75 pounds or something like that if there are severe health problems involved. Or flat out, maybe there's just too many goals. And that's something that I'm aware of in a kind of a sport business setting, is sometimes there are just too many metrics and too many goals all the time, and it's hard to keep them straight. And you think you're making progress on one goal because you need to complete this project by this time, and then you find out that maybe you've conflated that project timeline with something else because you've got 25 different things going on. So it's going to be incumbent upon the leader to really help that individual by finding what that sweet spot is. What is that balance in terms of goals, processes, strategies that push them so that they can grow, but they're not so difficult that they discourage future progress. Finally, I think this is really important, and I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about it here, is one of the underlying themes for this class is leadership. And so a lot of what I talk about, I kind of couch it in if you're a coach working with an athlete, or if you're a leader working with someone in a sport organizational setting, or if you're a personal trainer or coach working with a client, that type of thing. So there's kind of an educational leadership component to it. And it's very easy to sabotage the goal setting process for employees or athletes or clients. Okay, especially if you let personal feelings towards that individual get in the way. And that is highly unethical, because your job as a leader is to help people grow, right? Regardless of maybe how you feel about them, that on a personal level, that's really what your job is about as a leader. So here are a couple of principles of goal setting that are associated with ethics within the world of sport and performance psychology. Principle 1 is competence. Set important and meaningful goals. To set unimportant goals is to waste people's time and to diminish their effort and to diminish the fact that they want to achieve something. Principle 2 is integrity. Be honest when setting goals. If you're not honest about your client or your athlete or your employee or even your intentions, let's be honest here, about setting these goals, then you are engaging in unethical behavior and setting up that person to be unsuccessful. And they place a lot of trust in you as the leader, as the trainer or the coach or the educator, whatever it is. And so you don't want to do anything to create distrust. Professional responsibility. You have a duty to your subordinates and your industry to take this seriously and help where you can. Again, regardless of personal feelings of that organization or individuals, things like that. Respect people's dignity. Do not embarrass them. I've seen this too many times in the world of athletics when a coach, unfortunately, is sort of grinding an axe against an athlete, and so they do things to embarrass them. And they call them out and they set goals full well knowing that they cannot achieve or reach them, and then dress them down in front of the team, for example, for not meeting their goals. That is not respecting someone. It's not respecting their personal dignity, and it's a form of embarrassment. And to me, and I'll speak from my own point of view here, that's not respecting the profession. The profession is not to embarrass people. Being a coach or an educator or a leader is to help people and organizations and communities grow incrementally at times, but to grow nonetheless. It's not to necessarily make fun of or embarrass anyone. Concern for others' welfare. Do not put people in harm's way. If you think about a personal trainer knowing a client, obviously, or a coach and an athlete, these are very real things. You have to understand where the person is if they're starting a physical activity program. And just because you can run a marathon doesn't mean that they can run a marathon just yet. And so having them run 5 miles, that doesn't seem like much to you, but that could put them in serious physical and emotional jeopardy. So please be aware of other people and be concerned for them. Finally, a social responsibility. Think about something more than yourself and performance. We have a responsibility to our communities. We have a responsibility to our organization, and we have a responsibility to that person if you're working in a one-on-one situation and setting. And let's say you're a coach and you just personally you don't like this particular athlete, but you have a responsibility to them, to the coaching profession, and to sport, humanity in general, not to put them in positions that they can be compromised, that they can be hurt, or they can embarrass themselves or other people, right? It's about understanding the time, space, and place where leadership is going to take place. And that's really, I'm not insinuating that anyone in this class would ever do any of these things, but I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the ethical principles associated with some of these individual specific professions, but also our world of sport. It's high profile, it's high impact, it can do a lot of positive things, but it can also do a lot of damage if it's not done in the right way. And so we just want to make sure that we've talked about it and that we're all on the same page moving forward.